June 4th, 1942. 10:22 a.m. The sky over the Pacific Ocean. Lieutenant Richard Halsey Best, nicknamed Dick, sat in the cockpit of his SBD Dauntless dive bomber at 15,000 feet, looking down. Below, on the surface of the ocean, he could see 4 Japanese aircraft carriers. The pride of the Imperial Fleet. The ships that had devastated Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. 4 carriers. Hundreds of aircraft. Thousands of sailors. On the carrier decks, Dick could see aircraft, Japanese Zero fighters and bombers, lined up in neat rows. They were being fueled. Bombs were being loaded. They were preparing for takeoff. In 5 minutes, these planes were supposed to launch and destroy the American fleet. But Dick Best had one advantage the Japanese didn't expect. The Japanese didn't know that above them, circling in the clouds, were 37 American dive bombers. Dick Best checked his watch. 10:22. He grabbed his radio transmitter and spoke one word. Attack. 37 aircraft rolled into their dives. What happened in the next 5 minutes changed the course of World War II in the Pacific. This is the story of how a handful of American pilots, flying obsolete aircraft, crushed the invincible Japanese fleet. This is the story of the Battle of Midway. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Japan attacked the American military base without a declaration of war. 353 Japanese aircraft from 6 carriers struck the sleeping base at dawn. In 2 hours, they destroyed or damaged 8 battleships, 3 cruisers, 4 destroyers, and 188 aircraft. 2,403 Americans died. It was a triumph for the Japanese fleet. A perfectly planned and executed operation. America was paralyzed. But the Japanese made a mistake. They didn't destroy the American aircraft carriers. They weren't in port. Enterprise, Lexington, and Saratoga were at sea, delivering aircraft to other bases. And the Japanese didn't destroy Pearl Harbor's oil storage tanks and repair facilities. If they had, the American fleet would have been paralyzed for a year. December 1941. May 1942. Japan conquered the Pacific with incredible speed. The Philippines, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, Burma, and Malaya all fell. The Japanese fleet ruled the seas. The carrier strike force, Kido-butai, was invincible. 6 carriers under Admiral Nagumo's command crushed everything in their path. The Americans retreated everywhere. But on April 18, 1942, something unexpected happened. The Doolittle Raid. 16 American B-25 bombers, launched from the carrier Hornet, which itself was insane. B-25s weren't carrier aircraft, attacked Tokyo. The damage was minimal, but the psychological effect was enormous. Japan, which considered itself invulnerable, had been attacked. The emperor was in danger. The Japanese command panicked. How did American planes reach Tokyo? Where were our carriers? Why didn't they protect the homeland? Admiral Yamamoto decided they needed to destroy the American carriers once and for all. A decisive battle was needed. Target: Midway Atoll. Midway, a tiny atoll in the center of the Pacific Ocean, 1,200 miles from Hawaii. 2 small islands with an airstrip. Strategically, a key position. An American base protecting Hawaii. Yamamoto developed a plan. Phase 1. Diversionary strike on the Aleutian Islands in the north. The Americans would send part of their fleet there. Phase 2. Main forces attack Midway. 4 carriers under Admiral Nagumo would destroy the base and all aircraft. Phase 3. When the American fleet came to Midway's rescue, and they would, America couldn't afford to lose Midway. The Japanese would ambush them. Superior forces would destroy the American carriers. Phase 4. Landing force on Midway. Capture the atoll. Result: America loses its last carriers in the Pacific. Hawaii becomes defenseless. Japan would dominate the Pacific for years. The plan was brilliant. meticulously detailed. The Japanese assembled a colossal armada. 4 heavy carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, 2 light carriers, 11 battleships, including Yamato, the largest battleship in history, 16 cruisers, 46 destroyers, transport ships with landing forces over 200 ships total, 600 aircraft. Against them, the Americans could field 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown, 8 cruisers, 15 destroyers, plus aircraft on Midway itself, about 110 planes. Roughly 360 aircraft against 600. The Japanese outnumbered the Americans. Their pilots were more experienced. Their aircraft were better. Their admirals were victors. The Americans had one advantage. They knew the Japanese were coming. May 1942. Pearl Harbor. Basement of Fleet Headquarters. A team of cryptographers led by Commander Joseph Rochefort intercepted Japanese radio messages, decrypted them, tried to understand Japanese plans. And in mid-May, Rochefort noticed something interesting. The Japanese frequently mentioned in their messages a place with the code name AF. Rochefort suspected AF was Midway, but he needed to verify. Rochefort sent a message to the Midway base commander. Transmit in plain text that the island has freshwater problems. The desalination plant is broken. Midway transmitted the message. 2 days later, Americans intercepted a Japanese radio message. AF reports fresh water shortage. Bingo. AF was Midway. Rochefort reported to Admiral Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The Japanese are attacking Midway. Approximately June 4th. 4 carriers under Nagumo's command. Nimitz believed Rochefort and began preparing an ambush. Nimitz gathered everything he had. Enterprise and Hornet returned from deployment. Yorktown was damaged in the previous battle, Coral Sea. Engineers said repairs would take 3 months. You have 3 days, Nimitz said. Workers labored around the clock, patched holes, replaced damaged systems. After 72 hours, Yorktown put to sea. Not fully repaired, but able to fight. 3 carriers. That's all America had in the Pacific. If they lost, America would lose its fleet. Hawaii would be defenseless. Perhaps they'd have to make peace with Japan on Japanese terms. Everything depended on this battle. Nimitz appointed Admirals Fletcher and Spruance as commanders. Young, aggressive officers. The plan was simple. The Japanese think they're attacking Midway by surprise, but American carriers would be waiting in ambush northeast of Midway. When Japanese planes attacked the island, the Americans would strike the Japanese carriers, while they were vulnerable, with aircraft on their decks. A risky plan. Everything depended on timing, luck, and the courage of pilots. The American carriers put to sea at the end of May. The Japanese didn't know they were sailing into a trap. June 4th, 1942, 4:30 a.m. The Japanese carrier group was 250 miles northwest of Midway. Admiral Nagumo gave the order. First wave. Attack Midway. 108 aircraft rose from the decks of Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. 36 Zero fighters, 36 dive bombers, 36 torpedo bombers. Their mission: destroy the runway, storage facilities, aircraft on Midway. At 6:16 they reached Midway and attacked. American aircraft on Midway scrambled to meet them. Obsolete F-4F Wildcat and F-2A Buffalo fighters. The Japanese Zeros tore them apart. The Americans lost 17 fighters out of 26. The Japanese, only 5. Japanese bombers pounded the island. Oil tanks burned. Buildings collapsed. But the runway survived. The Japanese commander reported to Nagumo. Second strike required. Nagumo made a decision. Prepare second wave. On the decks of the Japanese carriers stood aircraft of the second wave, 93 planes, armed with torpedoes for attacking ships, in case American carriers appeared. Nagumo ordered, remove torpedoes, mount bombs for striking the island. This took time. Mechanics removed torpedoes, hauled them to the holds, brought up bombs, mounted them under the aircraft. The decks of the Japanese carriers became chaos. Torpedoes lay scattered on the decks. Aircraft stood exposed. Fuel hoses stretched everywhere. At 7:28, a Japanese seaplane scout, which had launched late due to technical problems, transmitted a message Nagumo didn't want to hear. 10 American ships sighted. Bearing 10 degrees, distance 240 miles. Nagumo was shocked. The Americans weren't supposed to be here. Intelligence said American carriers were in the South Pacific. But they were here. "Are there carriers among them?" Nagumo asked. "Clarifying," the scout replied. Nagumo froze in indecision. What to do? The first wave aircraft were returning from Midway, running out of fuel. They needed to be recovered on the decks. But on the decks, second wave aircraft with bombs. He had to decide, attack the American ships now or wait. At 7:45, the scout reported, "One carrier among the American ships." Everything changed. Nagumo ordered, "Remove bombs, remount torpedoes, prepare to attack carrier." The decks of the Japanese carriers became total chaos. Mechanics removed bombs, hauled torpedoes back. Torpedoes and bombs lay everywhere. Fuel hoses, aircraft. All of this was incredibly dangerous. One spark, and the carrier would explode. But Nagumo had no choice. At 8:30, the first wave aircraft began landing on the carriers. They needed to be recovered, refueled, rearmed. The Japanese worked at a frantic pace. Nagumo planned to launch the strike group by 10:30. But American aircraft were already flying toward him. 7 a.m. American carriers. Admiral Spruance gave the order. Launch all aircraft. Attack Japanese carriers. It was a risky decision. The Japanese were at the extreme range of American aircraft. If pilots didn't find the target quickly, they wouldn't have enough fuel to return. But Spruance understood. They needed to attack now, while the Japanese carriers were vulnerable. From Enterprise and Hornet, 116 aircraft launched. From the damaged Yorktown, another 35. 151 aircraft total. They flew toward the Japanese. The torpedo bombers found the Japanese carriers first. The TBD Devastator torpedo bomber. Obsolete, slow aircraft. Maximum speed, 205 miles per hour. To drop a torpedo, you had to fly low, straight, predictable. A suicide machine. 41 torpedo bombers from 3 American carriers attacked the Japanese. Japanese Zero fighters fell on them like a wolf pack. Squadron VT-8 from Hornet, 15 aircraft, was completely annihilated. All 15 shot down. 29 men killed. Only one survived. Ensign George Gay. His plane crashed into the ocean. He escaped from the wreckage and floated, watching the battle from the water. Squadron VT-6 from Enterprise, 14 aircraft, lost 10 planes. Squadron VT-3 from Yorktown, 12 aircraft, lost 10 planes. Of 41 torpedo bombers, only 6 returned. Not a single torpedo hit its target. The torpedo bombers were destroyed. It was a catastrophe, but their sacrifice was not in vain. 10:20 a.m. Japanese Zero fighters protecting the carriers had descended to low altitude, pursuing American torpedo bombers. All the Zeros were down low. The sky above the Japanese carriers was empty. On the decks of Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu stood aircraft, fueled, armed, ready for takeoff. In a few minutes they would launch and destroy the American carriers. The Japanese thought they'd repelled the attack. They didn't know one thing. American dive bombers were already above them. 37 SBD Dauntless aircraft from Enterprise and Yorktown circled in the clouds at 15,000 feet. The Japanese didn't see them. Lieutenant Dick Best, squadron commander from Enterprise, looked down and couldn't believe his eyes. 4 Japanese carriers, without fighter cover, with aircraft on their decks, a perfect target. He grabbed his radio. Attack. 10:22 a.m. 37 bombers rolled into their dives. The SBD Dauntless dive bomber. To attack, The pilot must 1. Position the aircraft over the target. 2. Push into a vertical dive 70 degrees. 3. Fly down at 250 miles per hour. 4. At 1,500 feet, release the bomb. 5. Pull sharply out of the dive, enduring G-forces up to 6 G. The pilot sees only the target, the entire body pressed into the seat from the G-forces. If you pull out too late, you crash into the water. If you pull out too early, you miss. It requires incredible skill, composure, nerves of steel. Dick Best rolled into his dive. His target, Akagi, Nagumo's flagship. The howl of wind, speed increasing, the carrier deck growing in the bomb sight. Japanese on the deck, look up, see him, shout, and run. 1,500 feet. Release. One 1,000-pound bomb drops from the aircraft. Direct hit. The bomb punched through Akagi's deck and exploded in the hangar, where fueled aircraft stood, with torpedoes and bombs hanging. Detonation. Akagi became hell. Secondary explosions. Aircraft exploded like firecrackers. Fire consumed the ship. At the same time, other bombers attacked Kaga and Soryu. Kaga took 4 direct hits in 2 minutes. Explosions tore open the deck. Fire engulfed the entire ship. Soryu took 3 hits. 1 explosion destroyed the engine room. The ship lost power. 3 Japanese carriers were burning. Time from start of attack to last hit, 5 minutes. 5 minutes that changed the war. The 4th Japanese carrier, Hiryu, wasn't attacked. It was positioned separately from the others. The admiral on Hiryu immediately launched his aircraft and sent them to attack the Americans. Japanese planes found Yorktown and attacked. 3 bombs hit the carrier. Fires. Damage. But Yorktown held. A second wave of Japanese torpedo bombers attacked again. 2 torpedoes hit the side. Yorktown began listing. Order. Abandon ship. The crew evacuated. But the Americans found Hiryu. Dive bombers from Enterprise attacked it in the afternoon. 4 bombs hit Hiryu. The carrier caught fire. By evening, all 4 Japanese carriers were burning. Crews evacuated. That night, admirals ordered the dying ship scuttled with destroyer torpedoes. Akagi sank at 5 a.m. on June 5th. Kaga sank at 7:25. Soryu sank at 7:13. Hiryu sank at 9 o'clock. Japan lost more carriers in one day than in the entire rest of the war. American losses: 1 carrier, Yorktown, finished off by Japanese submarine June 7th. 1 destroyer, 147 aircraft, 307 men killed. Japanese losses: 4 heavy carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, 248 aircraft, 3,057 men killed. Among the dead, Japan's best pilots, Pearl Harbor veterans. Japan didn't just lose ships, it lost its people. Training a carrier pilot takes years. Japan lost hundreds of the most experienced aviators, men who couldn't be quickly replaced. America could build new carriers faster than Japan. America could train new pilots faster. After Midway, the balance of power in the Pacific began to shift. The Battle of Midway became the turning point of the Pacific War. Before Midway, Japan advanced. After Midway, it only retreated. Japan never again conducted major offensive operations. The initiative passed to the United States. Admiral Yamamoto, the man who planned Pearl Harbor and Midway, said after the battle, "We have lost the war. Midway was our chance. We missed it." 11 months later, in April 1943, American fighters, acting on a decrypted radio message, intercepted Yamamoto's plane over the Solomon Islands and shot it down. Admiral Yamamoto was killed. The Pacific War continued for 3 more years. Okinawa, Iwo Jima, the Philippines, atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the outcome was decided after 5 minutes on June 4, 1942. Lieutenant Dick Best, the pilot who sank Akagi, made a second sortie that same day and damaged Hiryu. He became the only pilot in history to score bomb hits on 2 enemy carriers in one day. A month after Midway, Best contracted tuberculosis, inhaling toxic gases from faulty oxygen equipment. He was medically retired. He never flew again. He died in 2001 at age 91. Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor of Squadron VT-8, floated in the ocean for 30 hours before being rescued. He watched the entire battle from the water, saw the Japanese carriers burning. After the war, he became a commercial airline pilot. He died in 1994. Commander Joseph Rochefort, the cryptographer who broke the Japanese codes and predicted the Midway attack, didn't receive the recognition he deserved immediately after the battle. Interagency rivalries in intelligence led to his contribution being downplayed. Only in 1986, a year after his death, did President Reagan posthumously award Rochefort the Distinguished Service Medal, the highest award for intelligence service. Without Rochefort, there would have been no victory at Midway. He gave the Americans what they didn't have: knowledge. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the American Carrier Group, became the hero of Midway. His composure and aggressive attack decided the battle's outcome. After the war, he became U.S. ambassador to Japan. He met with Japanese admirals he'd fought against. They called him the most dangerous opponent we ever faced. He died in 1969 at age 83. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, made the right decision. Trust intelligence and ambush the Japanese. It was incredibly risky. If Rochefort had been wrong, if the Japanese had attacked elsewhere, America would have lost its last carriers. But Nimitz took the risk and won. After the war, Nimitz became Chief of Naval Operations. He died in 1966 at age 80. At his funeral, dozens of admirals attended, thousands of sailors who had served under his command. One of them said, "He gave us a chance to win the war." And we took that chance. The defeated Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commander of the Japanese Carrier Group, survived Midway, but his career was destroyed. He was a talented tactician, but at the critical moment made fatal decisions, rearming aircraft from torpedoes to bombs, then back again. This indecision cost Japan the battle. In July 1944, during the Battle of Saipan, Nagumo committed ritual suicide, seppuku. He was 61 years old. Captain Minoru Genda, the chief planner of the Pearl Harbor attack, serving on Akagi, survived Midway. He was evacuated from the burning carrier. After the war, Genda became a member of the Japan Self-Defense Forces. He met with American Midway veterans. They became friends. Genda said, "We lost Midway the moment we decided the Americans were a weak opponent. We underestimated them. That was our main mistake." He died in 1989 at age 84. Pilots who survived the destruction of 4 carriers later said, "We saw hell. The decks became a sea of fire. Aircraft exploded. Men burned alive. Some jumped into the water and drowned because the sea was covered with burning oil." The screams. We heard those screams for the rest of our lives.